to Everyday Cooking with Ann. Today we're going to be making Ann's Mint Brownies, which is a great addition to our holiday platter that we're going to be putting together this year. So let's get started and find out what you do to make the best mint brownies you've ever tasted. Okay, we are going to be putting in melted butter, which we're melting right now, and then we're going to add 2 cups of sugar and a half a cup of cocoa. Let me just show you quickly the brand of cocoa that I use, and I buy this, you can see it's a huge bag. This only cost me, I think, $13 or $15, and it lasts me a whole year because I make hot chocolate a lot too. But anything I use cocoa, this is my brand. It's a top quality Callebut Royal Dutch processed cocoa. I'll never go back to Hershey's again. This is what you want to do if you're a baker. So you might want to consider buying some. You can get it at Orson Gigi in Salt Lake City. You can buy it online. Okay, we're also going to be adding 4 eggs. This is basically a typical brownie recipe. We're also going to do 2 1/2 cups of flour, and it calls for cake flour. In case you don't have cake flour, and I often don't do that, I also put in a little bit of cornstarch that makes it into cake flour. So a little bit of cornstarch makes it a little bit finer flour. So I put like a tablespoon of cornstarch in here to add with my flour. And I have 1½ teaspoons of baking powder and a ½ teaspoon of salt I'm mixing in here as well. So I'm going to mix this first. We'll also be adding some vanilla and some chopped walnuts in this first step of the recipe. Okay, and like I said, this is the first step that we're going to be doing, getting ready to put in the oven. So our butter is just about melted right now. And I'm going to go ahead and add the cocoa first. And mix it in quite well. Keeping this on between low and medium to melt everything. Okay, and then I'm going to add the 2 cups of sugar. I love this recipe because it's easy to make these brownies. You can make them right out of the pan. You don't need a mixer for any reason. And now I'm going to add the 4 eggs. These are my farm fresh eggs from my neighbor's chickens. They're a little bit smaller, but once I cracked them, they looked pretty good, so I didn't think I needed to add more. So I'm going to add these in. I'm going to turn my heat off now. I just want to beat this nicely with a wire whisk until it's all incorporated and quite shiny. I am now going to add my dry ingredients. I changed to a spoon now because it's a little bit harder to mix with that wire whisk. These are quite thick. Oh, and I have turned my oven on to 350 degrees to prepare us for these brownies to bake for about 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And these are optional, and I always choose the nuts because I'm a nut fanatic. So I'm going to put a cup of chopped walnuts. Walnuts are the best in brownies, I think, personally. I'm going to bring my pan that I prepared over here. This is a pan that I've sprayed some pan spray, or not pan, but just any kind of cooking spray in the bottom. I always do every bars or cookies, anything I'm making with a crust or bars or brownies, in my 9x13 pan, and I use a sheet of this same size paper because it covers all the sides too. So I really love. You can buy sheets of this at Orson Gigi too if you wanted to make an order. I love it. You can buy them by the 100 sheets. Usually about $10 for 100 sheets of this kind of parchment paper because it perfectly fits a 9x13 pan and other 15x10 sheets too. Sheet pan. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this mixture. You can see that took all of like maybe 5 minutes to put together. Okay, you don't need to watch me doing the rest of this, but I'm going to smooth this out and put it in my oven for, okay, we're going to be baking this for 20 minutes. We just removed our brownies from the oven. I neglected to tell you that these were baked for 25 minutes. I think I told you 20. It is 25 minutes that they were in there, and they're perfectly done. I've let them cool here for a little while because we're getting ready for the next step that we need to be able to put in the freezer. So I have here, this is going to be the mint layer on top of the brownies. So I've got 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, and I'm going to put just a dash of salt in here. I'm also going to put 1/4 of a cup of cold water, and I'm going to put in a 1/2 teaspoon of mint extract. I'm going to stir this up until it's all mixed together. Okay, now we are also going to put in a couple of drops of green food coloring. Now ask me, why in the world would I have this much green food coloring? You can ask my husband that. I sent him to the store and I said, get me some green food coloring. And this is what he came home with. I guess I could dye my hair in March maybe. I don't know. So we're going to throw a couple of drops of that, and it won't take much of this to do that. There you go. To make this nice bright green color to go with the mint. Okay, and then what we're going to do is add, now this is why this is a necessary ingredient. You know me, I like to use like butter instead of anything like shortening or anything, of course. Even in my pie crust I put a little bit of shortening, but mostly butter. But in this recipe you need the shortening because we are going to make a layer of this to go on. It needs to be kind of a stiff layer so it's not going to melt down or anything, so we need to use the shortening. So I've got about 1/3 of a cup of this that I'm going to add, and then I'm going to be beating this vigorously till it's very fluffy and ready to add to the top. So this will take a little bit of doing because I'm just doing it by hand, breaking down the shortening and just beating this really nicely. I've mixed up my mint powdered sugar topping, and I'm going to pour this all over the top of our brownies and spread this nice layer on. Now, this now has to go into the freezer for, maybe half an hour so that the topping will solidify. You want a hard topping before you put the final icing of the chocolate topping on top of this. So this is the middle layer. We're going to spread that all over here. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're not going to see this on the top. It'll be in the middle. Okay, in the freezer it goes. Topped our brownie cake with mint frosting. And then now we are going to make the chocolate topping up for the frosting as well. So what we've got is 2 1/3 cups of powdered sugar. And I'm going to add to that a 1/3 cup of our cocoa. This is our really good quality cocoa that you've seen before in this video and others as well. And I'm going to just mix this up a little bit with my wire whisk. I'm going to throw in, just because it's always good in frosting, a little dash of salt. I'm just doing this by hand in this bowl because I don't want to get my mixer out for something like this. Now, we are going to add 5 tablespoons of butter, softened butter. So I'm going to add that now. And I'll be mixing this up in here a little bit. I've mixed this up for about a minute or two so that the butter is basically cut into the dry ingredients there. I'm going to add a tablespoon, and I may add a little bit more to get the right consistency, but I'm going to add start off with a tablespoon of milk. And I'm going to put a tablespoon of white corn syrup. This is going to give it that shiny look. And I'm going to throw in about a teaspoon of my favorite, vanilla. Okay, you need to add a little bit more milk until it's the right consistency, so I'm putting in just a little bit more until I can get this correctly. Cream works here well too. Okay, it's starting to come together, and now you want to beat this until it is very nice and shiny. Now you could use a mixer for this and it would be a lot easier. I just didn't want to get my mixer out for this. And I think this is still a little bit too thick. This is really nice and fluffy. I'm going to put a little bit more milk in it. I don't want it quite this thick. In case you haven't noticed by now, I change the recipes all the time that I have to make it how I want it. Okay, now this is much, much smoother. Actually, I'm going to put just a little bit more. I don't know about you, but frosted brownies are always better than regular. Okay, I think it's about where I want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and add this to the top. And we're going to add a little bit more in a minute, but we're going to spread this as evenly as we can. You can see how nice and smooth it is. And I believe you're going to want to refrigerate this until this hardens a little bit too, because then it will be really easy to cut into pieces without it being a messy cut. And when we show you this in a little bit, when we're ready to serve it, I'm going to show you how I cut this with one of my dough scrapers, which makes really nice even cuts in brownies as well as other things like dough. We don't need any nuts or anything on here. We already have nuts, walnuts inside the batter. There you go.